The sun was dipping low over the endless stretch of desert highway, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, when 19-year-old Jamal Carter climbed onto a dusty Greyhound bus in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He was alone, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his earbuds blasting music to drown out the world. Jamal was on a solo trip across America, chasing a dream he couldn't quite put into words, a mix of freedom, adventure, and maybe a chance to figure out who he was. 6 years later, that same name, Jamal Carter, would be whispered in small towns and shouted in headlines, tied to a mystery that still sends chills down my spine. What happened to him? Where did he go? And why, after all those years, did they pull that from the murky waters of the Rio Grande? Stick with me, because this story is about to take you places you never expected. Jamal wasn't your typical teenager. Growing up in a rough part of Chicago, he'd seen things most kids his age couldn't imagine. Gunshots echoing down the block, friends lost to choices they couldn't undo. But Jamal was different. He had this quiet strength, a kind of light in his eyes that refused to dim, no matter how dark things got. His mom used to say he had a heart too big for his own good, always looking out for others, even when he had nothing to give. That's why, when he stepped onto that bus in the summer of 2019, he wasn't just running from something, he was running towards something. A fresh start, maybe. A chance to see the world beyond the concrete jungle he'd always known. He'd saved up for months, working double shifts at a corner store, just to buy that one-way ticket to nowhere in particular. The bus was crowded that evening, the air thick with the smell of cheap coffee and worn-out seats. Jamal found a spot near the back, next to a window where he could watch the desert blur by. Across from him, a pregnant woman struggled to settle into her seat. She was pale, her blonde hair tied back in a messy bun, her hands clutching a small bag like it was her lifeline. She looked exhausted, like the weight of the world was pressing down on her. Jamal didn't think twice. He stood up, flashed a shy smile, and offered her a seat. "Ma'am, you need this more than I do," he said, his voice soft but steady. The woman hesitated, her blue eyes searching his face like she was trying to figure out if he was for real. Then she nodded, grateful, and sank into the seat. That moment, that small act of kindness, was about to change everything. As the bus rumbled on through the night, the woman, her name was Claire, though Jamal didn't know it yet, started talking. She wasn't the chatty type, but something about Jamal's easy smile put her at ease. She told him she was heading to Texas, starting over after a bad breakup. She didn't say much about the baby, just that it was coming soon and she was scared. Jamal listened, nodding, not pushing her for details. He shared a little about himself too, how he was traveling to see the country, how he wanted to write stories someday, maybe even make it big. Claire smiled for the first time, her face softening. Then, out of nowhere, she reached into her bag, pulled out a small piece of paper, and scribbled something on it. She pressed it into Jamal's hand, her fingers trembling. "Don't read it now," she whispered. "Just keep it safe. You'll know when it's time." Jamal tucked the note into his pocket, confused but curious. He didn't know why, but something about the way she looked at him made his stomach twist. Was it a thank you? A phone number? Or something else entirely? He wanted to ask, but the bus lurched to a stop at a gas station, and Claire was gone, slipping into the crowd before he could say another word. He sat back down, the note burning a hole in his pocket, and stared out the window. The desert stretched out endlessly, hiding secrets in its shadows. He had no idea that note was about to set off a chain of events that would haunt him and the rest of us for years to come. Days turned into weeks, and Jamal kept moving. He hopped from one town to another, picking up odd jobs, sleeping in cheap motels or under the stars when money ran low. He kept the note in his wallet, unopened, like a promise he wasn't ready to break. But something was off. People started noticing Jamal wasn't just another drifter. He asked questions, too many questions, about things he shouldn't have known. About Claire. About where she was headed. About the people she might have been running from. In small towns along the Rio Grande, folks remembered him. A gas station clerk said he seemed nervous, always looking over his shoulder. A diner waitress swore she saw him talking to a man in a black SUV, his face tense, like he was scared. And then, just like that, Jamal vanished. 6 years passed. The world moved on, but Jamal's mom never stopped searching. She posted flyers, called every police station from New Mexico to Texas, begged anyone who'd listen to help find her boy. The note? No one knew what happened to it. Jamal's backpack, his wallet, everything he owned gone. Until one day, a fisherman on the Rio Grande hooked something strange in his net. It wasn't a fish. It wasn't trash. It was something that made the local cops go quiet, their faces pale. Something that brought Jamal's name back from the dead and turned a forgotten mystery into a full-blown obsession. What was it? And what did it have to do with Claire's note? I'm not gonna lie, this story gets wild. It's got kindness, betrayal, secrets buried deep in the desert, and a truth that'll make your jaw drop. Was Jamal's act of giving up his seat just a random moment, or did it pull him into something bigger, something dangerous? Who was Claire really running from? And what was on that note that could change everything? I've spent months digging into this, piecing together police reports, talking to witnesses, chasing leads that go places you won't believe. So hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stick with me for the next part. Because what they pulled from the Rio Grande, it's only the beginning. The Greyhound bus rolled on through the desert night, its tires humming against the cracked asphalt, carrying Jamal Carter further into the unknown. He sat alone now, Claire's empty seat a quiet reminder of their brief encounter. The note she'd given him felt heavy in his pocket, like it carried a weight he couldn't yet understand. He didn't open it, not yet. Something about her words, "You'll know when it's time," stuck with him, like a riddle he wasn't ready to solve. Outside, the stars glittered over the vast New Mexico landscape, but Jamal's mind was elsewhere, replaying the way Claire's eyes darted nervously, the way her voice trembled when she handed him that scrap of paper. Who was she? And why did she seem so scared? He leaned his head against the window, the cool glass grounding him as the bus carried him toward Texas, toward whatever lay ahead. Back in Chicago, Jamal's mom, Denise, was pacing her small apartment, her phone pressed to her ear. She'd always been a worrier, but this was different. Jamal had promised to call every few days, just to let her know he was okay. He'd kept that promise for the first week. Short calls from random towns, his voice bright with excitement as he described the mountains, the open roads, the people he met. But now, 3 days had passed without a word. Denise's gut told her something was wrong. She'd raised Jamal to be careful, to trust his instincts, but he was 19, full of dreams and just naive enough to think the world would be kind to a kid like him. She left another voicemail, her voice cracking. "Jamal, baby, just call me. Please." She didn't know it yet, but those calls were going nowhere. His phone was already dead, lost somewhere in the desert. The next morning, the bus pulled into a small town called Las Cruces, just shy of the Texas border. Jamal stepped off, stretching his legs and squinting into the bright sun. The town was quiet, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. He grabbed a coffee at a diner called Rosie's, a spot with chipped red booths and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. The waitress, a woman named Maria with kind eyes and a quick laugh, noticed Jamal right away. He wasn't like the usual drifters who passed through. There was something about him, a warmth that made her smile. "You look like you're carrying the world in that backpack," she teased, pouring him a refill. Jamal grinned, his dimples showing. "Just trying to see it all, you know," he said. He didn't mention Claire or the note, but Maria noticed how he kept patting his pocket, like he was making sure something was still there. While Jamal sipped his coffee, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Across the diner, a man in a dark jacket sat at the counter, his eyes hidden behind sunglasses. He hadn't touched his food, just kept glancing at Jamal, his movements slow and deliberate. Jamal tried to brush it off. Maybe he was just paranoid after Claire's cryptic warning. But when he left the diner and headed toward a cheap motel down the street, he swore he saw the same man lingering near a black SUV parked across the road. His heart picked up speed, but he told himself it was nothing. Just a guy. Just a car. He checked into the motel, a rundown place with flickering lights and thin walls, and locked the door behind him. For the first time, he pulled out the note. His fingers hesitated over the folded paper. Should he read it? Claire's voice echoed in his head. Keep it safe. He stuffed it back in his wallet, deciding to wait. But waiting, as he'd soon learn, was a mistake. Meanwhile, Claire was miles away, crossing into Texas under a new name. She'd ditched her phone, her ID, everything that could tie her to her old life. Her real name wasn't Claire, it was Emily Harper, a detail she'd kept from Jamal and everyone else on that bus. Emily wasn't just running from a bad breakup, like she'd told him. She was running from something, or someone far more dangerous. The bag she'd clutched so tightly held more than just clothes and cash. Inside was a small, leather-bound journal, filled with names, dates, and coded notes that could ruin lives if they fell into the wrong hands. Emily wasn't a nobody. She'd been a paralegal for a law firm in Denver, working on a case that uncovered secrets no one was supposed to know. Secrets about powerful people. Secrets worth killing for. When she handed Jamal that note, she hadn't meant to pull him into her mess. But desperation makes you do crazy things, and Emily was desperate. Back in Las Cruces, Jamal's days took on a rhythm. He stayed in town longer than he'd planned, picking up a job washing dishes at Rosie's to save up for his next bus ticket. Maria took a liking to him, slipping him extra food and asking about his travels. "You're too young to be out here alone," she'd say, half joking, half worried. Jamal just laughed it off, but he was starting to feel uneasy. The man in the dark jacket kept showing up, not every day, but often enough to make Jamal's skin crawl. Once, he saw the black SUV idling outside the diner while he was scrubbing plates in the back. Another time, he caught the man watching him from across the street as he walked to the motel. Jamal started taking different routes, keeping his head down, but the feeling of being followed never went away. One night, after a long shift, Jamal sat on the edge of his motel bed, staring at his wallet. The note was still there, unopened, but it felt like a magnet, pulling at him. He thought about Claire, Emily, though he didn't know that yet, and the fear in her eyes. What had she gotten him into? He was just a kid who gave up his seat, trying to do the right thing. Why did it feel like that one moment had changed everything? He pulled out his phone and started searching her name, Claire, along with words like missing and Texas. Nothing came up. He tried pregnant woman bus New Mexico, but the internet was spotty, and the results were useless. Frustrated, he tossed his phone aside. That's when he heard it, a soft knock at the door. His heart stopped. It was past midnight. No one knew he was here. Jamal froze, his eyes locked on the door. The knock came again, sharper this time. "Who's there?" he called, his voice steadier than he felt. No answer. He crept to the window, peeling back the curtain just enough to peek outside. The parking lot was dark, but he could make out the shape of the black SUV, its engine running. Panic surged through him. He grabbed his backpack, shoved his wallet in his pocket, and slipped out the back window, his sneakers hitting the gravel with a soft crunch. He didn't know where he was going, just that he had to move. The desert night was cold, the stars bright overhead, but Jamal felt like he was running out of time. In the weeks that followed, Jamal kept moving, staying off the grid. He ditched his phone after realizing it could be tracked, using cash for everything. He bounced between small towns along the Rio Grande, blending in as best he could. But the note stayed with him, a secret he couldn't shake. He still hadn't read it, afraid of what it might say, afraid it might confirm the worst. In one town, he overheard a conversation at a gas station about a woman who'd gone missing, a pregnant woman, last seen near the border. The clerk didn't have details, just that the cops were asking questions. Jamal's stomach twisted. Was it Claire? He wanted to ask, but something told him to keep quiet. The less he said, the safer he'd be. Denise, back in Chicago, was falling apart. She'd filed a missing persons report, but the police weren't much help. "He's an adult," they told her. "Probably just took off." They didn't understand. Jamal wasn't like that. He wouldn't just disappear. She started calling motels, bus stations, anyone who might have seen her son. One call led her to Rosie's diner in Las Cruces. Maria answered, her voice soft with sympathy. "Yeah, I remember him," she said. "Nice kid. Worked here for a bit, then left. Said he was heading to Texas." Denise's heart sank. Texas was huge, a needle in a haystack kind of place to find someone. But Maria mentioned something else. Jamal had seemed jumpy, like he was running from something. "There was this guy," Maria added. "Kept showing up, watching him. I didn't like it." Denise pressed for more, but Maria didn't have a name, just a bad feeling. Miles away, Emily was trying to start over in a small Texas town, using a fake ID and a new story. She dyed her hair brown, kept her head down, and found a job at a grocery store. The journal was hidden in a safe deposit box, its secrets locked away, but she couldn't stop looking over her shoulder. She thought about Jamal sometimes, wondering if he'd read the note, if he'd understood what it meant. She hadn't wanted to drag him into this, but that moment on the bus, his kindness, his open face, had made her impulsive. She'd needed someone to trust, just for a second. Now, she wondered if that choice had cost him everything. She didn't know he was gone. Not yet, but the guilt was already eating at her. By the time Jamal reached a dusty town called Del Rio, he was running on fumes. He'd been sleeping in abandoned lots, eating cheap gas station food, always moving. The black SUV hadn't shown up in a while, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still being watched. Del Rio was right on the Rio Grande, the river's murky waters cutting through the town like a line between safety and something darker. Jamal found a job cleaning boats at a small marina, hoping to stay under the radar. The owner, a gruff old man named Hector, liked him. "You work hard, kid," he'd say, tossing Jamal an extra few bucks at the end of the day. But even Hector noticed Jamal's nerves, the way he flinched at loud noises, the way he kept his backpack close, like it held something precious. One evening, as the sun set over the Rio Grande, Jamal sat by the water, his hands shaking. He couldn't keep running forever. The note was still in his wallet, unopened, but it felt like a ticking bomb. He thought about his mom, about the stories he wanted to write, about the life he'd dreamed of. He pulled out the note, his fingers brushing the worn paper. This was it. He had to know. But before he could unfold it, a shadow fell over him. He looked up, and there was the man in the dark jacket, his sunglasses gone, his eyes cold and unreadable. "You've got something that doesn't belong to you," the man said, his voice low. Jamal's heart pounded. He scrambled to his feet, clutching his backpack, and ran toward the riverbank. The man didn't chase him, not yet, but his words echoed in Jamal's head as he disappeared into the night. Years later, the Rio Grande would give up its secrets. That fisherman, the one who pulled something strange from the water, didn't know what he'd found at first. It was tangled in his net, heavy and waterlogged. When the cops arrived, their faces went white. They didn't say much, just sealed off the area and called in more officers. Word spread fast. Small towns love a mystery. People whispered about Jamal, about the kid who'd passed through, about the note no one could find. Was it connected to Claire, Emily, who'd vanished just as completely? Or was it something else, something bigger? The cops weren't talking, but the rumors were. And that thing they pulled from the river? It wasn't just evidence. It was a clue to a truth so twisted, it would keep us all guessing. This is where the story gets even crazier. Jamal's disappearance, Emily's secrets, that note. They're all pieces of a puzzle that stretches across the desert, from dusty diners to the banks of the Rio Grande. Who was following Jamal? What did Emily write on that note? And what did they pull from the river that brought this whole mystery back to life? I've been chasing this story for months, digging through old police files, talking to people who knew Jamal, trying to find Emily. The answers are out there, but they're buried deep. So, stick with me, hit that like button, and let's keep unraveling this together. Because the next part? It's going to blow your mind. Jamal's sneakers pounded against the hard-packed dirt as he sprinted along the Rio Grande's edge, the river's dark waters glinting under the moonlight. His breath came in sharp gasps, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. The man's words, "You've got something that doesn't belong to you," rang in his ears, pushing him faster, deeper into the night. He didn't know who the man was or what he wanted, but the coldness in his voice was enough to make Jamal's blood run cold. The note, still tucked in his wallet, felt like a curse now, tying him to something he didn't understand. He ducked behind a cluster of mesquite trees, his heart hammering as he listened for footsteps, for the rumble of that black SUV. Nothing. Just the sound of the river and his own ragged breathing. He couldn't keep running like this, but going back wasn't an option either. Whatever he'd stumbled into, it was bigger than him, and it wasn't letting go. In a small Texas town 100 miles away, Emily Harper, still calling herself Claire to anyone who asked, was trying to disappear. She worked the night shift at a 24-hour grocery store, her brown-dyed hair pulled into a tight ponytail, her eyes scanning every customer who walked through the sliding doors. The journal, her insurance policy, was safe in that deposit box, but it didn't ease the knot in her stomach. She'd heard whispers in town about a missing kid, a black teenager who'd passed through a few months back, asking questions about a pregnant woman. Her heart sank when she heard it.
Jamal.
She hadn't meant to drag him into this, but that note, she'd written it in a moment of panic, thinking it might save her if things went south. Now, she wasn't so sure. Had he read it? Did he know what it meant? And if he did, was that why he was gone? Emily pushed the thought away, ringing up a customer's groceries with shaking hands. She couldn't afford to think about Jamal. She had her own problems, like the man who'd been watching her from the parking lot, sitting in a car that looked too much like the one she'd seen in New Mexico. Back in Chicago, Denise Carter was fighting a battle of her own. She'd turned her apartment into a war room, walls covered with maps, sticky notes, and grainy photos of Jamal from his last call, his smile frozen on her phone screen. The police had all but given up, telling her Jamal was probably just living off the grid. But Denise knew her son. He wasn't the type to ghost her, to leave her wondering if he was alive or dead. She'd started reaching out to anyone who might have seen him, piecing together his trail from New Mexico to Texas. A call to a motel in Las Cruces led her to a clerk who remembered Jamal checking in, mentioning he'd seemed nervous, always checking the parking lot. Then there was Maria, the diner waitress, who told her about the man in the dark jacket. Denise's hand shook as she wrote down every detail, her mind racing. Who was following her boy? And what did it have to do with that pregnant woman he'd mentioned in one of his calls, the one he'd given his seat to? In Del Rio, the town where Jamal had last been seen, the locals were starting to talk. Hector, the marina owner, had taken a shine to Jamal, but he'd noticed things weren't right. The kid was jumpy, always looking over his shoulder, like he was expecting trouble. One day, he'd found Jamal sitting by the river, clutching his backpack, like it was his lifeline. "You okay, kid?" Hector had asked. Jamal had just nodded, but his eyes told a different story. Now, months later, Hector couldn't shake the guilt. He'd seen the black SUV cruising around the marina a few times, but he hadn't thought much of it. Del Rio got all kinds of visitors. When Jamal stopped showing up, Hector figured he'd moved on. But then the rumors started, whispers about a kid who'd vanished, and Hector started wondering if he should have said something. He told the cops what he knew, but they didn't seem too interested. Just another runaway, they said. Hector wasn't so sure. The man in the dark jacket, the one who'd spooked Jamal that night by the river, wasn't a ghost. His name was Victor Ruiz, though no one in Del Rio knew that. He wasn't local, he didn't belong to any place really. Victor was a fixer, the kind of guy you called when you needed a problem to disappear. He'd been hired by someone with deep pockets, someone who wanted Emily Harper found, and that journal recovered, no matter the cost. Victor didn't know who the kid was at first, just some drifter who'd gotten in the way. But when he saw Jamal talking to Emily on that bus, saw her slip him that note, he knew the kid was trouble. Victor had been tailing Emily for weeks, keeping his distance, waiting for her to slip up. Jamal was a complication, a loose end. And Victor didn't like loose ends. He'd tracked him to Del Rio, watched him from the shadows, waiting for the right moment. That night by the Rio Grande, he'd planned to take the note, but Jamal had bolted. Victor wasn't worried. The kid couldn't run forever. Emily's journal was the key to everything, though Jamal didn't know it. The note she'd given him wasn't the journal itself, just a cryptic message, a set of numbers and words that pointed to its location. She'd written it in a moment of desperation, thinking if something happened to her, someone needed to know the truth. The journal held evidence of a scandal that could bring down powerful people, names, dates, bank accounts, deals that were supposed to stay buried. Emily had stumbled onto it by accident, working late nights at the law firm, piecing together documents that didn't add up. When she realized what she had, she knew she couldn't stay. She'd fled Denver, leaving everything behind, but they were already after her. The note was her backup plan, a way to make sure the truth wouldn't die with her. But giving it to Jamal was a mistake, one she couldn't undo. In a quiet bar in Del Rio, a retired cop named Ray Martinez was nursing a beer, listening to the locals swap stories about the kid who'd disappeared. Ray had been off the force for a year, but his instincts hadn't dulled. He'd heard about Jamal from Hector, heard about the black SUV, the way the kid had seemed scared. Ray didn't buy the runaway story. He'd seen too many cases like this, people who vanished because they knew something they shouldn't. He started asking around, quietly, not wanting to draw attention. A bartender mentioned a woman, a pregnant lady who'd passed through town around the same time, looking like she was running from something. Ray's gut told him it was connected. He didn't have a name, but he had a hunch. He started digging, calling old contacts, checking bus records. The name Claire came up, but it led nowhere. Whoever she was, she'd covered her tracks. Denise wasn't sitting still. She'd scraped together every penny she had and flown to Texas, determined to find her son. She started in Las Cruces, retracing Jamal's steps, talking to anyone who'd listen. At Rosie's diner, Maria hugged her, tears in her eyes, and told her everything she remembered. He was a good kid, Maria said. He didn't deserve this. Denise clung to those words, but they didn't ease the ache in her chest. She drove to Del Rio, her hands gripping the steering wheel, her eyes red from sleepless nights. At the marina, Hector showed her where Jamal used to sit by the river, staring at the water like it held answers. Denise stood there, the wind whipping her hair, and whispered a prayer. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she wasn't leaving without her son. Meanwhile, Emily was unraveling. The grocery store job was a cover, a way to blend in, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. One night, she saw a car idling outside her apartment, its headlights off. She didn't sleep that night, clutching a kitchen knife, her heart racing. She thought about the journal, about the names in it, the lives it could destroy. She thought about Jamal, wondering if he'd read the note, if he'd figured out what it meant. She didn't know he was missing, didn't know the man in the dark jacket was closing in. But she knew her time was running out. She started making plans to move again, to disappear for good this time. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jamal's face, his shy smile as he gave her his seat. She'd pulled him into this, and the guilt was crushing her. Victor Ruiz was patient, but he was getting tired. He'd lost Jamal that night by the river, but he wasn't worried. The kid was scared, sloppy, leaving a trail a mile wide. Victor had eyes everywhere, gas station clerks, motel managers, people who owed him favors. He knew Jamal was still in Texas, still carrying that note. Victor didn't know what was on it, but he knew it was important. His client had been clear, get the note, get the journal, make sure no one talks. Victor didn't ask questions. He didn't care about the why. But as the weeks turned into months, he started to wonder if this job was bigger than he'd thought. The kid was just a kid, but he was slippery, and that made Victor uneasy. He didn't like surprises. In Del Rio, the river kept its secrets, but the town was buzzing. The fisherman's discovery was still under wraps, the cops keeping it quiet, but rumors were spreading. Some said it was a bag, heavy with something no one could explain. Others said it was something worse. Ray Martinez heard the whispers and started poking around the police station, using his old badge to get answers. The cops were tight-lipped, but he caught enough to know it was connected to Jamal. Something about a backpack, waterlogged and torn, pulled from the Rio Grande. Ray's stomach twisted. He didn't know Jamal, but he knew the river didn't give up its secrets easily. Whatever was in that backpack, it was going to change everything. Denise stood by the river one evening, holding a photo of Jamal, her tears falling into the dirt. She didn't know about the fisherman's find, didn't know about the backpack. But she felt it, a pull, like her son was out there, waiting for her. She'd started talking to a local reporter, a woman named Carla who'd taken an interest in the case. Carla had a knack for digging up dirt, and she'd heard about the pregnant woman, the black SUV, the kid who'd vanished. She didn't have proof, but she had a theory. Jamal had stumbled into something big, something that got people erased. She promised Denise she'd keep digging, but she warned her to be careful. People don't just disappear, Carla said. Someone makes them disappear. The pieces were falling into place, but the puzzle was still incomplete. Jamal, running for his life, clutching a note he didn't understand. Emily, hiding in plain sight, haunted by her choices. Denise, fighting to find her son. Victor, closing in on his prey. Ray, chasing a hunch that could blow the lid off everything. And that thing in the river, whatever it was, waiting to tell its story. The Rio Grande flowed on, silent and deep, holding secrets that could destroy lives. What was on that note? Who was Victor working for? And what did they pull from the water that made the cops go quiet? I've been chasing this story, talking to witnesses, digging through records, trying to find the truth. It's out there, buried in the desert, waiting to be found. So, stick with me, hit that subscribe button, and let's keep going. Because this mystery, it's only getting darker. The Rio Grande shimmered under the Texas moon, its surface calm but hiding currents that could pull you under in a heartbeat. Jamal Carter was out there somewhere, or at least Denise Carter prayed he was. She stood by the riverbank in Del Rio, clutching Jamal's photo, her eyes scanning the water like it might give her answers. It had been months since her son vanished, but every lead, every whisper, brought her back to this river. The fisherman's discovery, a waterlogged backpack, rumored to be Jamal's, had set the town buzzing, but the cops were still silent, their faces tight whenever Denise asked questions. She didn't know what they'd found inside that bag, but the way they avoided her eyes told her it was bad. Her hands shook as she tucked the photo into her pocket, her heart heavy with a mother's fear. She'd come too far to give up now, but the truth felt closer and more dangerous than ever. In a cramped apartment across town, Emily Harper was packing a bag, her movements quick and frantic. The grocery store job was over. She'd quit after spotting that car again, idling outside her place with its headlights off. She knew it was Victor or someone like him, closing in. The journal was still safe in the deposit box, but it didn't ease the knot in her stomach. She'd heard whispers in town about a missing kid, a black teenager who'd passed through a few months back, asking questions about a pregnant woman. Her heart sank when she heard it.
Jamal.
She hadn't meant to drag him into this, but that note, she'd written it in a moment of panic, thinking it might save her if things went south. Now, she wasn't so sure. Had he read it? Did he know what it meant? And if he did, was that why he was gone? Emily pushed the thought away, ringing up a customer's groceries with shaking hands. She couldn't afford to think about Jamal. She had her own problems, like the man who'd been watching her from the parking lot, sitting in a car that looked too much like the one she'd seen in New Mexico. Victor Ruiz was done playing games. He leaned against his black SUV, parked in the alley behind Emily's apartment, his eyes fixed on her flickering light. He'd been patient, tracking her across Texas, but time was running out. His client was getting restless, demanding the journal and the note, no more delays. Victor didn't know what was in them, but he knew enough. Those pages held secrets that could ruin powerful people, and they'd pay anything to keep them buried. Jamal had been a problem, a kid who'd gotten too close to Emily, too close to the truth. Victor had tracked him to Del Rio, cornered him by the river, but the kid had slipped away, leaving nothing but questions. Now, Victor was sure Emily had the answers. He checked his watch, his fingers brushing the gun tucked under his jacket. Tonight, he'd get what he came for, one way or another. In a dimly lit bar across town, Ray Martinez sat hunched over a notebook, piecing together the puzzle. The retired cop had spent weeks chasing leads, talking to locals, digging through old bus records. He'd confirmed Claire was Emily Harper, a paralegal from Denver who'd vanished after working on a high-profile case. The case was hush-hush, tied to some big names in the corporate world, But Ray's old contacts had given him enough. Emily had stumbled onto something dirty, money laundering, maybe worse, and she'd run when it got too hot. The kid, Jamal, was a wild card, a good Samaritan who'd gotten caught in the crossfire. Ray's gut told him the backpack from the river was the key, but the cops were stonewalling him. He'd heard whispers of what was inside, something that didn't add up, something that made the lead detective go pale. Ray sipped his beer, his mind racing. He was too close to back off now. Denise wasn't alone anymore. Carla, the local reporter, had become her shadow, driven by a mix of curiosity and outrage. Carla had a nose for stories like this, small-town mysteries with big secrets, and she was convinced Jamal's disappearance was no accident. She'd been digging into Emily's past, chasing rumors of a woman on the run, and she'd found a thread, a law firm in Denver, a case that had been shut down fast, and a paralegal who'd disappeared right after. Carla didn't have proof, but she had a name, Emily Harper, and a hunch that tied her to Jamal. She met Denise at a coffee shop, her laptop open to a blurry photo of a woman who looked like Claire from the bus. "This her?" Carla asked. Denise nodded, her throat tight. "What did she do to my boy?" she whispered. Carla didn't have an answer, but she promised to find one. "We're getting close," she said, squeezing Denise's hand. "I can feel it." Out by the Rio Grande, Hector stood by the marina, staring at the water. He hadn't seen Jamal since that last day, when the kid had seemed so on edge, his eyes darting to every shadow. Hector hadn't known what to make of it then, but now, with the rumors swirling about the backpack, he couldn't stop thinking about it. He told the cops about the black SUV, about how Jamal had seemed scared, but they'd brushed him off. Now, with Denise in town asking questions, Hector felt a weight he couldn't shake. He remembered the last time he saw Jamal, sitting by the river, clutching his backpack like it was all he had left. Hector had asked if he was okay, and Jamal had just smiled, that same shy smile that made everyone like him. "I'm good, man," he'd said, but his hands were shaking. Hector wished he'd pushed harder, done something. Now it was too late. Miles away, Jamal was still running, though no one knew it. He'd slipped out of Del Rio that night, after Victor's chilling warning, and headed north, sticking to back roads and small towns. The note was still in his wallet, unopened, a constant reminder of the trouble he was in. He didn't know why he hadn't read it yet. Fear, maybe, or some instinct telling him it was safer not to know. He'd found a new hiding spot, a rundown trailer park outside San Antonio, where he paid cash to a guy who didn't ask questions. But he was running out of money, and the fear was eating him alive. Every noise made him jump. Every stranger felt like a threat. He thought about his mom, about calling her, but he was afraid to use a phone, afraid they'd find him, whoever they were. He sat in the dark, his back against the trailer's thin wall, and stared at his backpack. The note was in there, waiting. He knew he couldn't keep running forever, but what choice did he have? Emily, too, was on the move. She'd left her apartment in the middle of the night, her bag slung over her shoulder, her heart pounding. She'd seen Victor's car, knew he was close. She caught a bus to Austin, blending into the crowd, her fake ID tucked in her pocket. The journal was still in the deposit box, but she couldn't go back for it, not yet. She needed a plan, a way to expose the truth without getting herself killed. She thought about Jamal, his kind eyes, his easy smile. She'd trusted him, for a moment, and now he was gone. The note she'd given him was a code, a set of numbers pointing to the bank where she'd hidden the journal. She'd thought it would keep her safe, but now it felt like a death sentence. She stared out the bus window, the city lights blurring past, and wondered if she'd ever stop running. Victor was methodical, relentless. He'd lost Jamal, but Emily was still in his sights. He'd tracked her to the grocery store, watched her from a distance, waiting for the right moment. Now, she'd slipped away again, but he wasn't worried. He had contacts, people who owed him, people who could find anyone. His client was getting impatient, though, and Victor didn't like pressure. He sat in his SUV, scrolling through photos on his phone. Emily on the bus, Jamal at the marina, both of them unaware of how close he'd been. The note was the key, but the journal was the prize. He didn't know what was in it, but he knew it was worth more than his usual jobs. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling into the night air, and made a call. "She's in Austin," he said, his voice low. "I'll have her by tomorrow." The voice on the other end was sharp, impatient. "And the kid?" Victor exhaled, his eyes narrowing. "He's next." Ray Martinez was getting too close. He'd managed to get a look at the police report on the backpack, though it was heavily redacted. It was Jamal's, no doubt. His name was written on a tag inside, faded but clear. The contents were vague in the report, listed as personal items, but Ray's source at the station let slip something strange. A sealed plastic bag, still intact, with a piece of paper inside. Ray's heart raced. Was it the note? He didn't know, but he knew it was important. He'd also heard about a woman, a paralegal from Denver, tied to a case that had been buried fast. Emily Harper. He'd found her name in an old article, a brief mention of a missing employee. The pieces were coming together, but they didn't fit yet. He called Carla, the reporter, and told her to meet him in Del Rio. "Bring everything you've got on Emily," he said. "This is bigger than we thought." Denise and Carla met Ray at a diner near the river, their faces grim. Denise clutched a stack of flyers with Jamal's picture, her hands trembling. "What's in that backpack?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ray hesitated, his eyes soft with sympathy. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but it's connected to your son, and to that woman, Emily." Denise's breath hitched. "She did this to him. She gave him something, didn't she?" Carla nodded, pulling out her laptop. "A note," she said. "At least, that's what I think. Something to do with a journal she was hiding. Something dangerous." Denise's eyes filled with tears. "My boy's out there alone because of her." Ray reached across the table, his voice steady. "We're gonna find him, Denise. I promise." That night, the Rio Grande flowed quietly, its secrets locked in its depths. Somewhere out there, Jamal was hiding, the note burning a hole in his pocket. Emily was on the run, her life unraveling with every step. Victor was closing in, his patience wearing thin. Denise, Ray, and Carla were chasing a truth that felt just out of reach. And the backpack, sitting in an evidence locker, held something that could blow the lid off everything, a piece of paper, sealed tight, waiting to be opened. What was on it? What secrets did Emily hide? And where was Jamal, right now, as the world closed in around him? I've been digging deeper, talking to sources, chasing every lead. The truth is out there, and it's closer than ever. So hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and let's get to the bottom of this. Because the next part, it's going to change everything. The night air in Austin was thick with summer heat, but Emily Harper felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. She sat on a creaky motel bed, her bag packed, her fake ID clutched in her hand. The bus ride from her last hideout had been a blur, her mind stuck on Jamal and the note she'd given him. She'd heard the rumors, a missing kid, a backpack pulled from the Rio Grande, and her gut twisted with dread. Had she done this to him? The journal, hidden in a bank vault, was her only leverage, but it was also a death sentence if Victor found her. She glanced at the motel door, double-checking the lock. She'd seen his black SUV again, cruising past the motel an hour ago, slow and deliberate. Her fingers trembled as she pulled out a burner phone, one she'd bought with cash. She needed help, someone she could trust. But who? The answer hit her like a punch. Sarah, her old friend from the law firm, the only person who might believe her. She dialed the number, her heart racing, not knowing that call would unravel everything. In San Antonio, Jamal was barely holding it together. The trailer park was quiet, but every creak of the old trailer made him jump. He hadn't slept in days, surviving on instant coffee and fear. The note was still in his wallet, unopened, a weight he couldn't ignore. He'd almost read it a dozen times, but every time he reached for it, Claire's, Emily's, words stopped him. "You'll know when it's time." But when was that? He was tired of running, tired of looking over his shoulder. He thought about his mom, her voice on those voicemails he couldn't answer. He wanted to call her, to tell her he was okay, but he didn't trust phones anymore. Not after the man in the dark jacket, Victor, had found him in Del Rio. Jamal's eyes darted to the trailer's window, where the curtains swayed in the breeze. Then he froze. A shadow moved outside, quick and silent. His breath caught as he grabbed his backpack and slipped under the bed, his heart pounding so loud he was sure it would give him away. Back in Del Rio, Denise Carter sat across from Ray Martinez and Carla in the diner, her hands wrapped around a cold coffee mug. The air between them was heavy, the weight of their discoveries pressing down. Ray had just dropped a bomb. The backpack from the Rio Grande wasn't just Jamal's. It contained a sealed plastic bag with a note inside, and the cops were treating it like it was radioactive. "They won't let me see it," Ray said, his voice low. "But my guy at the station says it's got numbers, maybe a code." Denise's eyes widened, her voice shaking. "Like the note that woman gave him?" Carla nodded, her fingers tapping her laptop. "It's gotta be." Emily was running from something big, and she dragged Jamal into it. Denise's hands clenched into fists. "I want to see it. I want to know what's worth my son's life." Ray leaned forward, his eyes steady. "We're close, Denise. But we gotta be careful. Whoever's behind this, they're watching." Victor Ruiz was one step ahead, always. He sat in his SUV outside Emily's motel, his phone buzzing with a new lead. His contact in San Antonio had spotted Jamal, holed up in a trailer park, looking like a ghost. Victor's lips curled into a smirk. The kid was slippery, but he was running out of places to hide. Victor's client had upped the pressure, their voice sharp on the last call. "Get the note, get the journal, or you're done." Victor didn't flinch, but he felt the heat. This wasn't just about money anymore. His client was scared, and scared people were dangerous. He didn't know what was in that journal, but he knew it could bring down names that made headlines, names with power. Emily was his priority now, but Jamal was still out there, and Victor wasn't about to let a loose end slip through his fingers again. He started the engine, the SUV's headlights cutting through the dark as he headed toward the motel. Time to end this. In Chicago, Sarah Coleman was staring at her phone, her heart racing. She hadn't heard from Emily in months, not since her friend vanished from the law firm in Denver. The call came out of nowhere, Emily's voice trembling on the other end. "Sarah, I need you," she'd said, her words rushed. "I'm in trouble. Big trouble." Emily didn't say much, just enough to make Sarah's blood run cold. A journal, a scandal, powerful people who'd do anything to keep it quiet. Sarah had worked with Emily on that case, seen the files that didn't add up, the ones their boss had told them to shred. She'd thought Emily had just quit, moved on. Now, she realized her friend was running for her life. "Stay where you are," Sarah told her, grabbing her keys. "I'm coming to Austin." But as she hung up, a chill ran through her. She'd seen a car outside her apartment earlier, a dark sedan that didn't belong. Was it a coincidence? Or had Emily's call just put her in the crosshairs? Ray Martinez was pushing his luck. He'd slipped into the Del Rio police station after hours, using an old favor to get past the desk sergeant. The evidence locker was his target, the backpack his goal. He didn't trust the cops to do this right. They were too quiet, too nervous. Ray's flashlight swept over the shelves until he found it, a soggy, torn backpack with Jamal's name on a faded tag. His hands shook as he opened it, revealing a sealed plastic bag inside. Through the plastic, he could see a piece of paper, folded tight, with faint ink showing through. Numbers, maybe words. He didn't dare open it, not here, but his gut told him this was it, the note Denise had talked about. He snapped a quick photo with his phone, then froze as footsteps echoed down the hall. Someone was coming. Ray slipped the backpack back, his heart racing, and ducked out before he was caught. He didn't know it yet, but that photo would change everything. Carla was digging deeper, her laptop glowing in the dark of her motel room. She'd found an old article about the Denver law firm, buried in an archive, mentioning a whistleblower who'd gone missing. Emily Harper. The article hinted at a scandal, money laundering, maybe worse, but it was light on details. Carla's instincts screamed cover-up. She cross-referenced Emily's name with bus records and found a match, a ticket from Albuquerque to Texas under the name Claire. It was her. Carla's hands shook as she typed up her notes, connecting the dots. Emily had given Jamal a note, something tied to that journal, and now both of them were gone. But there was something else, a name in the article, a lawyer who'd worked the case with Emily. Sarah Coleman. Carla's heart skipped. Was Sarah involved? She fired off an email to a contact in Denver, asking about Sarah, not knowing she'd just stumbled onto the second twist in this tangled mess. In San Antonio, Jamal couldn't stay still. The shadow outside the trailer had spooked him, and he was done waiting. He crawled out from under the bed, his hands shaking as he grabbed his backpack. He had to move, now. The trailer park was too open, too exposed. He slipped out the back door, keeping low, and headed for the bus station. He didn't have much cash left, but he needed to get out of Texas, maybe head north, somewhere Victor couldn't find him. As he walked, the note in his wallet felt heavier than ever. He stopped under a streetlight, his breath uneven, and finally pulled it out. His fingers trembled as he unfolded the paper, revealing a series of numbers and a single word: vault. His mind raced. A bank? A code? Before he could process it, headlights flashed behind him, and the low rumble of an engine made his stomach drop. He shoved the note back in his pocket and ran, the sound of tires on gravel chasing him into the dark. Denise was falling apart, but she wouldn't stop. She'd spent the day putting up flyers in Del Rio, Jamal's face staring back at her from every pole and shop window. She'd overheard locals talking about the backpack, about something weird inside it, but no one had details. She confronted the police chief, her voice raw with desperation. "That's my son's bag," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Tell me what you found." The chief's eyes darted away, his voice vague. "We're still processing it, ma'am."
Denise didn't buy it.
She called Ray, her voice shaking. "They're hiding something. I know it." Ray didn't argue. He'd seen the note, or at least a photo of it. He promised to get answers, but he warned her to watch her back. "Whoever's behind this, they don't play nice," he said. Denise didn't care. She'd face anyone to find her son. In Austin, Emily waited for Sarah, her nerves frayed. She didn't know if she could trust her old friend, but she was out of options. The motel room felt like a trap, the walls closing in. She checked the window again, her heart pounding. No SUV, but that didn't mean Victor wasn't out there. She thought about the journal, the names in it, politicians, executives, people with blood on their hands. She'd been naive to think she could outrun them. Her phone buzzed, a text from Sarah, "On my way. Stay safe." But as Emily read it, a car door slammed outside, and heavy footsteps approached her door. She froze, her breath shallow. Was it Victor? Or someone worse? Victor was closing the net. His contact in San Antonio had confirmed Jamal's location, and now he had Emily's too. He didn't know about Sarah, didn't know about the photo Ray had taken. But he could feel the job slipping, the stakes climbing higher. His client had made it clear, no loose ends. He gripped the steering wheel, his jaw tight, as he pulled up to the motel. The note, the journal, the kid, the woman, it all came down to tonight. He didn't know a new player had entered the game, someone who could turn his world upside down. The Rio Grande was silent, but its secrets were screaming to be heard. Jamal was running, the note in his pocket, a ticking bomb. Emily was cornered, her past catching up. Denise, Ray, and Carla were closing in on the truth, but at what cost? Sarah's arrival was about to change everything, a twist no one saw coming. What was in that note? What was in the backpack? And who was pulling the strings, watching from the shadows? I've been chasing the story, piecing together the clues, and it's leading somewhere dark. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stick with me. Because what's coming next? It's gonna shake you to your core. The motel door rattled under a heavy knock, and Emily Harper's breath caught in her throat. She stood frozen in the dim Austin motel room, her bag half-packed, her burner phone clutched in her hand. The footsteps outside were deliberate, each one sending a jolt of fear through her. She'd been running for months, hiding from Victor and the people who wanted her journal silenced forever. The knock came again, louder, and her eyes darted to the window. No time to run. She grabbed a lamp, the only weapon she could find, and backed against the wall, her heart pounding. The door burst open, and there stood Sarah Coleman, her old friend from the law firm, her face pale but determined. "Emily, it's me," Sarah whispered, stepping inside and closing the door fast. "We don't have much time." Emily's knees buckled with relief, but Sarah's next words chilled her. "They're here, and they know about the kid." In San Antonio, Jamal Carter sprinted through the dark, his sneakers slapping against the pavement as the black SUV's headlights cut through the night behind him. He'd seen the note, vault, and a string of numbers, and his mind was racing. It was a bank, he was sure of it, but he didn't know what it meant or why it made him a target. The trailer park was miles back, and he was out of places to hide. His lungs burned, his legs ached, but he couldn't stop. Victor's voice echoed in his head. "You've got something that doesn't belong to you." Jamal clutched his backpack, the note tucked in his wallet, and ducked into an alley, praying he'd lost the SUV. But the engine's rumble grew louder, and he knew he was running out of time. He had to get to a bank, figure out what the note meant, and end this nightmare. In Del Rio, Ray Martinez was racing against the clock. The photo of the note from Jamal's backpack burned a hole in his phone, the blurry numbers taunting him. He'd slipped out of the police station, barely avoiding the night guard, and was now holed up in his truck, studying the image. The numbers looked like a bank account or a safe deposit box, and the word vault was clear enough. Ray's gut told him this was it, the key to Jamal, Emily, and the whole mess. He called Carla, his voice low. "I've got something. Meet me at the bank on Main Street. Bring Denise." Carla didn't hesitate, grabbing her laptop and notes, while Denise, her eyes red from crying, clung to the hope that they were finally close to finding her son. The three of them were converging on the truth, but they weren't the only ones. Victor Ruiz stepped out of his SUV, his boots crunching on the gravel outside Emily's motel. He tracked her to Austin, his patience gone. His client's last call had been a threat. Get the journal, get the note, or pay the price. Victor didn't know Sarah was inside, didn't know she'd brought a flash drive with copies of the same files Emily had fled with, files that named names, dates, and deals that could topple empires. He checked his gun, his eyes scanning the motel's flickering lights. Emily was in there, and he wasn't leaving without her. But as he approached the door, his phone buzzed with a new message. The kids in San Antonio. Bank on Commerce Street.
Move now.
Victor cursed under his breath. 2 targets, 2 cities. He had to choose. He turned back to his SUV, deciding Jamal was the easier mark. Emily could wait. Inside the motel, Sarah was talking fast, her voice urgent. "I made copies, Emily. Everything you found, those accounts, the payoffs, the names. I sent them to a reporter I trust in Denver." Emily's eyes widened, her voice trembling. "You what?" "Sarah, they'll kill you for this." Sarah shook her head, her jaw set. "They're already after you. And that kid, Jamal, he's caught up in it because of you." Emily's face crumpled, guilt washing over her. "I didn't mean to, I just gave him the note to keep it safe." Sarah grabbed her shoulders. "We can fix this. But we need that journal, and we need to find him." They didn't know Victor was already on his way to San Antonio, or that the bank they were headed for was about to become ground zero. In San Antonio, Jamal reached the bank on Commerce Street just as the sun began to rise. It was a small branch, nondescript, but the numbers on the note matched the ones on a deposit box key he'd found taped inside his wallet, something he hadn't noticed until now. His hands shook as he approached the counter, the note and key clutched tight. "I need to access a safe deposit box," he told the clerk, his voice unsteady. The clerk, an older woman with kind eyes, nodded and led him to the vault. Jamal's heart raced as he inserted the key, the lock clicking open to reveal a small leather journal. He didn't open it, not yet, but he knew this was what they were after. He stuffed it in his backpack, his mind spinning. He had to get out, find a way to contact his mom, get this to someone who could help. But as he stepped outside, the black SUV was waiting, Victor leaning against it, his eyes cold. "Hand it over, kid," he said, his hand resting on his gun. In Del Rio, Ray, Carla, and Denise pulled up to the bank, only to find it was the wrong one. Ray's photo of the note had been blurry, the numbers hard to read, and he'd misjudged the location. Carla's phone pinged with an email from her Denver contact. Sarah Coleman's on a plane to Austin. She's got evidence. Find her. Denise's hands shook as she gripped Ray's arm. Where's my son? She whispered. Ray didn't answer, his eyes on the photo. He zoomed in, squinting at the numbers.
San Antonio, he said suddenly.
It's not here. It's Commerce Street. They piled back into the truck, speeding toward San Antonio, not knowing they were racing toward a showdown. The bank's parking lot was quiet, but the air crackled with tension. Jamal stood frozen, Victor's gun gleaming in the morning light. The Journal, kid, Victor said, his voice low.
Now.
Jamal's mind raced. He could run, but he wouldn't make it far. He could fight, but he had nothing but his backpack. Then, out of nowhere, tires screeched and a car roared into the lot. It was Sarah, with Emily in the passenger seat, their faces pale but resolute. Jamal? Emily shouted, jumping out. Victor spun, his gun now aimed at her. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he growled. Emily raised her hands, her voice steady despite her fear. It's over, Victor. The files are out. Reporters have them. Victor's eyes narrowed, but before he could move, another car screeched in, Ray's truck, with Denise and Carla inside. Denise leapt out, her eyes locking on Jamal. Baby, she cried, running toward him. Victor swung his gun toward her, but Ray was faster, tackling him to the ground. The gun skidded across the pavement, and Carla grabbed it, her hands shaking. Jamal dropped to his knees, clutching his mom, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, he whispered. Emily handed the journal to Sarah, who held it like it was dynamite. This ends it, Sarah said, her voice firm. The police arrived minutes later, alerted by a bank employee, and Victor was cuffed, his face a mask of rage. The journal was opened, its pages revealing a web of corruption, names of CEOs, politicians, and deals that had been buried for years. Emily's evidence, combined with Sarah's copies, was enough to blow the scandal wide open. Jamal was safe, reunited with Denise, and Emily was finally free. But as the dust settled, a final twist emerged. Carla, sorting through her notes, found a hidden message in the journal, a name that hadn't been mentioned before. It wasn't just a CEO or a politician. It was someone closer, someone who'd been pulling strings from the start. The lead detective in Del Rio, the one who'd stonewalled Ray and Denise. He'd been on the payroll, keeping the backpack's contents quiet, letting Victor move freely. Carla's hands shook as she showed Ray the name. He's still out there, she whispered. The cops had Victor. The journal was public, but this man, this shadow, was still free, and he knew they'd exposed him. The Rio Grande glittered in the distance, its secrets not fully told. Jamal was safe, Emily was free, but the story wasn't over. Someone was still watching, and the truth was far from done. Stick with me, hit subscribe, and let's find out what happens next. Because this mystery, it's not over yet. The morning sun beat down on the San Antonio bank parking lot, where the dust was still settling from the chaotic showdown. Jamal Carter clung to his mom, Denise, his tears soaking her shoulder as she held him tight, whispering, "You're safe now, baby." Emily Harper stood nearby, her face pale but relieved, the journal now in Sarah Coleman's hands, its pages heavy with secrets that had nearly cost them everything. Victor Ruiz was in cuffs, his cold eyes glaring from the back of a police car as it pulled away. Ray Martinez leaned against his truck, catching his breath after tackling Victor, while Carla, the reporter, clutched the gun she'd picked up, her hands still shaking. The journal's contents, names, dates, and dirty deals, were out, thanks to Sarah's flash drive and the copies she'd sent to her reporter friend in Denver. The scandal was breaking, headlines already forming in Carla's mind. But the final twist, the one Carla had just uncovered in the journal, hung over them like a storm cloud. The lead detective in Del Rio, a man named Frank Delgado, was one of the names listed. He'd been on the payroll, covering up the truth, letting Victor hunt unchecked. He was still out there, and that knowledge cast a shadow over their victory. Denise pulled back, cupping Jamal's face, her eyes searching his. "What happened to you?" she asked, her voice raw. Jamal's throat tightened as he tried to explain. The bus, the pregnant woman, the note, the man in the dark jacket. He pulled the note from his wallet, now crumpled but intact, and handed it to her. She gave me this, he said, nodding toward Emily. I didn't know what it meant, but it made me a target. Denise's hands trembled as she unfolded the paper, revealing the numbers and the word vault. She looked at Emily, her eyes hard. You did this to my son. Emily's face crumpled, guilt washing over her. I didn't mean to, she whispered. I was scared running. I thought he'd be safe. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady. She didn't know, Denise. None of us did. But we've got the truth now, and it's going to change everything. Ray took the note from Denise, his eyes narrowing as he compared it to the photo he'd snapped of the one in the backpack. They matched. This is it, he said, his voice low. The key to the journal. Emily, you hit it well. Emily nodded, her voice barely audible. I had to. Those names, they're powerful. They'd do anything to keep this quiet. Carla, still holding the gun like it might burn her, set it down on Ray's truck and opened her laptop. It's not quiet anymore, she said, pulling up an email from her Denver contact. The reporter had already published a breaking story, naming the CEOs and politicians in the journal, linking them to money laundering and offshore accounts. The story was spreading like wildfire, trending on social media with hashtags like #Rio Grande Mystery and #Justice for Jamal. But Carla's eyes were on the journal's last page, the one with Delgado's name. He's still out there, she said, her voice tight. And he knows we're onto him. Jamal sat on the curb, his backpack at his feet, trying to process it all. He'd been running for months, scared out of his mind, all because he gave a woman his seat on a bus. He looked at Emily, who was talking quietly with Sarah, and felt a mix of anger and pity. She'd been running too, just like him, but her choices had nearly gotten him killed. Still, he couldn't hate her. She'd been desperate, and he knew what that felt like. He thought about his dream of writing stories, of seeing the world. That dream felt so far away now, but holding his mom's hand, he felt a spark of it come back. I'm okay, Mom, he said, his voice stronger. I'm gonna be okay. Denise hugged him again, tears streaming down her face. You're my heart, Jamal. Don't you ever forget that. In Austin, the police were swarming the motel where Emily had been hiding, tipped off by Sarah's call. They'd missed Victor, but they found evidence he'd left behind, a burner phone with texts linking him to Delgado. The detective's name was now on every cop's radar, and a manhunt was starting. Ray, Carla, and Denise drove back to Del Rio, determined to confront Delgado before he could disappear. Ray's old contacts in the force were buzzing, feeding him updates. Delgado had been seen leaving the station late, his car packed like he was skipping town. Ray gripped the wheel, his jaw tight. He's not getting away, he said. Carla nodded, typing furiously on her laptop, sending every detail to her Denver contact. This story's not just about Jamal and Emily anymore, she said. It's about how deep this goes. Emily and Sarah stayed in San Antonio, working with the police to hand over the journal and the flash drive. Emily was exhausted, her body sagging under the weight of months on the run. She looked at Sarah, her eyes filled with gratitude. You didn't have to do this, she said. Sarah shook her head, a small smile on her lips. You were my friend, Em. I couldn't let you face this alone. The police took their statements, promising protection as the scandal broke wide open. Emily's name was in the news now, not as Claire, but as the whistleblower who'd risked everything to expose the truth. She thought about Jamal, about the note she'd given him, and her heart ached. I need to see him, she told Sarah. I need to apologize. Sarah nodded, squeezing her hand. You will. But first, we make sure Delgado can't hurt anyone else. In Del Rio, Ray's truck pulled up to the police station just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The place was chaos, cops running in and out, radios crackling with updates on Delgado. Ray, Carla, and Denise pushed through, demanding answers. The desk sergeant, a young guy who knew Ray, pulled them aside. Delgado's gone, he whispered. Left an hour ago. We found his office cleaned out. Files gone, computer wiped. Denise's heart sank, but Ray's eyes narrowed. He's running, but he's not gone far. Carla's phone pinged again, this time with a tip from a source. Delgado had been spotted at a gas station near the Rio Grande, heading toward the border. Ray didn't hesitate. "Let's go," he said, and the three of them piled back into the truck, the river calling them back to where it all began. The Rio Grande was dark and quiet as they reached the gas station, its neon sign flickering in the night. Delgado's car was there, parked crookedly, the driver's door open. Ray slowed the truck, his hand on the gun he still carried from his cop days. "Stay here," he told Denise and Carla, but Denise shook her head, her voice fierce. "That's my son's life he played with. I'm coming." Carla grabbed her phone, ready to record whatever happened. They crept toward the car, the air thick with tension. Delgado was nowhere in sight, but the river was just steps away, its waters lapping softly against the bank. Ray's flashlight swept the area, catching a glint of something metal in the dirt, a badge. Delgado's badge, dropped in his haste. "He's here," Ray whispered, his heart pounding. They found him by the river, his silhouette stark against the moonlight. Delgado was kneeling, shoving papers into a bag, his movements frantic. Ray stepped forward, his gun raised. "It's over, Frank," he called. Delgado froze, his eyes wild as he turned. "You don't know what you're messing with, Ray," he spat. "These people, they'll bury you." Denise stepped into the light, her voice shaking but strong. "You helped them take my son." "Why?" Delgado's face twisted, a mix of fear and defiance. "It was just a job. I didn't know the kid would get hurt." Carla was recording, her phone steady as she captured every word. Ray moved closer, his voice low. "You're done. The journal's out. The world knows." Delgado's shoulders sagged, and he dropped the bag, papers spilling into the dirt. He didn't fight as Ray cuffed him, the fight gone out of him. The papers in Delgado's bag were a goldmine, more evidence, more names, tying him to Victor and the higher-ups in the scandal. Carla sent them to her contact, and within hours, the story exploded. News outlets across the country ran with it. Whistleblower exposes corporate corruption, missing teen found alive, dirty cop caught in Rio Grande scandal. Jamal and Denise went home to Chicago, where he started writing again, pouring his story into words that would one day become a book. Emily moved to a new city, under witness protection, but she kept in touch with Sarah, who'd become her lifeline. They met Jamal once, months later, in a quiet cafe. Emily apologized, tears in her eyes, and Jamal forgave her, his smile soft but real. "You were scared," he said. "I get it." Denise hugged her, a silent understanding passing between them. Ray retired for good this time, but he kept tabs on the case, making sure Delgado and the others faced justice. The detective was convicted, along with a dozen others named in the journal, their empires crumbling under the weight of the truth. Carla's reporting earned her a Pulitzer nomination, but she stayed humble, dedicating her work to Jamal and Denise. "This is their story," she told her readers. "A kid who did the right thing, and a mom who never gave up." The Rio Grande kept flowing, its secrets finally laid bare, but it left a mark on everyone. Jamal would walk by Lake Michigan sometimes, staring at the water, thinking about how close he'd come to losing everything. He'd write about it, his pen steady, his heart full. The takeaway? Kindness can spark a chain reaction, for better or worse. Jamal's simple act of giving up his seat set off a storm, but it also brought down a web of lies. Denise's love kept her fighting, even when hope was thin. Emily's courage, flawed as it was, exposed a truth that changed lives. And people like Ray and Carla showed that one person's determination can make a difference. The world's messy, full of shadows, but there's light in it too. So, as you watch this, think about the choices you make, the people you help, the truths you stand for. Hit that subscribe button, share the story, and let's keep shining a light on the mysteries that matter. Because the Rio Grande's done talking, but we're not.